Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? In this video, I wanted to kind of have like a heart-to-heart or a discussion or conversation. The camera's shaking quite a lot, isn't it? Yeah, with you guys. And it's to do with my own personal journey, both in and out of the dawah, with Salafism. I want to kind of bring this to the table because a lot of people are interested in this for some reason. So I'll tell them my own journey. And in that, I want to kind of give my own feedback, my own mistakes that I've made, and also some of the realizations I've had, especially with UK or let's say Western Salafism. So the first thing I'll say is that, or ikhwa, I should say, I started to become, let's say, moderately practicing around 14, 15, and like more practicing around the age of 17, yeah? When I was in sixth form. I think that's when I started to take it seriously, like more seriously, starting to learn the religion, stuff like that. Now I'm 31, so it's probably been about 15 years. I've just turned 31, so just about 15 years. And in the beginning, obviously, like when you start, the way I started is I started, reading the Quran, trying to learn the Arabic language. I realized that this was the key to accessing knowledge, to accessing, the Islamic sciences and stuff like that. So that's the first thing. Afterwards, I would say some 2-3 years later, this whole sectarian discussion became, let's say, more pronounced. Especially I was in the process of discovering my own identity. And when I got to the age of, let's say, 19, 20, it became more and more of a discussion, especially when I went to university and I started seeing different sects, interacting with Shia, Sufi, this person, that person. So the questions became more like, let's say, pronounced in my own mind. And I started to do my own discoveries. Already, what wasn't being, like, for me, which is a non-starter or something which wasn't very convincing to me, were things like Ahmadiyya and Shiaism. So they were already, I bypassed that. And I think a lot of people would easily bypass those, let's say, sects because of the lack of evidence that they have, especially when you look at their key doctrines and compare them with the Quran. But then I started to look at, okay, within, let's say, the mainstream or the broad definition of a Sunni Islam, what kind of individuals there were, what kind of groups there were, and these kinds of things. So I was initially drawn to, let's say, Salafism, and I was drawn to it because it just gave me clarity. Like, it was, I think a lot of people that start off with religion or religious, like Tadayyun, they start off with Salafism. It's because it gives you clarity, and they had some very powerful USPs, and by the way, when I say they, I'm speaking in third person, but in many ways I've retained a lot of my, let's say, Salafi kind of belief system. I'm telling you, like, how I was thinking about it at that particular time of my journey. So I saw that individuals were quoting the Quran, quoting the Sunnah, that they were making mentions to the Salaf. Like me personally, being an Egyptian, I was an avid consumer of something called Qanatul Rahman, Qanatul Nas, particular channels on the Fada'iyyah, the Arabic satellite, which had people like Mohammed Hassan and Washaq al-Huwaini and stuff like that. So I was an avid consumer of those. And in addition to that, I was an avid consumer of the three main mashayikh, like, the Ibn Baz, for Salafis in the modern era, Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, and Sheikh Al-Albani, rahimahumullah, all of them actually, Jamian. And in fact, I used to really enjoy listening to like Sheikh Al-Albani's particular, like his debates and stuff like that. I used to be very happy to see the next sharit and this and that. What's this one? His debate with this group and debate with that group. And so I used to be an avid consumer of that. I was even pulled into these kind of like what I see now in hindsight as kind of like more tertiary issues, like for example the length of the beard, for instance. I remember going through this. I was actually going through like an inner conflict. So what is the length of the beard? Is it one qabda? Is it not one qabda? Is one fist or not one fist? I remember this was actually taking up a lot of my brain space at that time. So after we went through that particular journey, I'll be honest, like, I saw a couple of fatwas, innit? I saw a couple of fatwas from these mashayikh, especially in certain political situations and stuff, that I didn't feel completely connected with. And I realized that a lot of it, like modern day Salafism, is not exactly a rujua' ila al-kitabi wa sunnah wa salaf, but it's also other things as well. That's as far as I'm going to take it in this discussion. It's a lot of other things as well. There's a lot of politics behind it. There's a lot of discussion behind it. And for example, one person that I used to really listen to a lot was Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan. I used to watch all of his fatwa, like shows and stuff like that, when he used to ask questions and stuff like that. And then I started seeing certain inconsistencies, which I'll be honest with, I was troubled with as, let's say, 22, 23-year-old man. So I didn't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I didn't have that approach. I didn't say, okay, well, these guys, therefore, they're cancelled in my mind. I'm not going to respect any of them. To the contrary, in fact, they still remained, I would say, the main scholars that I took from this main, I would say up until the age of 25, 26 even. Until, maybe less than that, maybe 23, 24. Until there was a kind of like a turning point, I'll be honest, where I thought to myself, why those in particular? And then I started seeing like some Indian scholars doing shuruhat, Mauritanian scholars doing shuruhat, and even in my country, in Egypt. And I realized the world was a much bigger place than what I thought it was in terms of scholarship. Moreover, I'll be honest, when we first started, like, when you do talab al-ilm, yeah, and as a Salafi, you start off with these little books, like Usul al-Thalatha, Qawaid al-Arba'a, Kashf al-Shubuhat, and Nawaqid al-Islam, and you go through them. And there was this feeling, that if you go over this is a syllabus, if you go over it, you're kind of okay. And to be honest with you, in hindsight, I think that's a major, you'll be deluded to think that, because these are like 2-page pamphlets and stuff, and there's not really a level of scholarship there. So when I made that comment, I actually made that comment recently. I said, Sheikh Mohammed Abdul Wahhab, some people, they think they do hata of ilm. They have encompassed all knowledge because they have, because they've gone through Usul al-Thalatha, Qawaid al-Arba'a, and so on. And I realized that this was a very, it is such a delusion that some people have from it. And that was one of the things that made me feel like, nah, this is not necessarily a representation of reality in terms of talab al-ilm and stuff like that. It gives people a false impression of what you can and cannot achieve. And I said this publicly, in fact. I said this publicly, and people really took offense to it. Like, some from the Salafi community really took offense to it. And I'll be honest with you, I was thinking, this is a bit weird. Because although I get where they're coming from, I get it, and I fully understand. Maybe I shouldn't have said it in the tone that I say it in, or the way that I said it, and it's maybe istihqar, and I get it. You raise the sheikh to a very high standard, and I should be careful not to alienate individuals who really respect that sheikh. And these books, by the way, the contents of these books, like Usul al-Thalatha, the one I mentioned, for example, I don't see anything wrong with the content. By the way, there's nothing there that I object to be honest with you. It was just a notion that people think they can finish this book and then become some kind of aqidah experts and start doing tabdi'at and takfirat, that I was against. Anyway, so I realized that there was something troubling in the whole, what if you want to call it that, the Salafi movement. The main troubling thing is, the main idea of Salafism is going back to the Quran, Sunnah, and the Salaf. And it goes back to the hadith, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. The best generation is my generation, then the ones who come after them, the ones who come after them. Okay, that is clear in my mind. You go to the Quran, you go to the Sunnah, and you go to the first generations. But what I started to see was actually mukhalafa of this. I started to see people doing the opposite of that. In fact, who they were taking more seriously were these scholars of our times. People like Ibn Uthaymeen, Ibn Baz, Albani, and before them, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahumullahu jami'an. Yeah? That they were starting to take them more seriously. And I'm thinking, the whole thing you're telling me is, don't do taqleed. But you are effectively doing taqleed. To the point where I remember, wallahi, I used to pray, and I started to get annoyed by this whole fiqhi discussions, and how do you, I saw the Salafis attacking each other on these things. So I started following madhab, innit? I started following madhab al-Hanbali. Why? Because I don't have the time to go through each mas'ala and do bahth of it. Yeah, we can do that. It will take me years to do that, but I don't have the time. So it's a convenient method for me. It's a manhajiyat of tafaqquh, which I'm happy with, to go through a proper madhab. So I went through the Hanbali madhab. So I thought, I'm just going to pray like this. And in the Hanbali madhab, when you come out from ruku', you have to, I mean, you put your hands back like this, yeah? And there's two opinions. You can either put it here or you put it to your what do you call it? To your surah. So I did this one time, and this one guy come at me and says like, "Oh, this is a bid'ah." I was like, "But Imam Ahmad and this and that and this Salaf." He says, "But Albani said it's a bid'ah." And then this is where it clicked for me that this kind of behavior of fiqh tarjih and this and that, bro, like you're bringing me Albani, I'm bringing you Imam Ahmad. And then he brought me a qawl of Albani. He said that it's a bid'ah walau qalaha Ahmad, even if Ahmad said it. So this caused me confusion, because you're telling me to go back to the Salaf. You're telling me to go back to the olden days. You're telling me that these guys are better than us. And then you're telling me, wait a minute, if I go against Albani and Ibn Uthaymeen and Ibn Baz, then I am somehow deviated, then I'm going against the Salaf and so on. So it was critical mass for me at this point. I said to myself, no. I said, at the end of the day, this level of ta'assub, this level of taqleed, blind following, is too much. And I was not interested in that fiqhi approach at all. I'll be honest with you. So I prefer the way of madhab. Because why? Because it gives me mental clarity. I just follow the mu'tamad of the school. I just follow that. And if someone says, I say, I got Salaf. These are people that were, this is 1,000, let's say, years of collection of hadith and discussion among the scholars. I'm not going to come out and give you my own hukum. So that's one thing. People took offense to this approach. And the moment I started doing this, I started seeing resistance. I'll be honest with you. Among Salafis, like how dare you, offend this and offend that. So and this was probably one of the big mistakes that I made. I'll be honest with you, and I'll own it, and I retract it, and I've already repented for it, because the way it came across, I think it was too antagonizing and too much. So I came out maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago or something, 2 years, maybe less than that. I can't remember exactly when, yeah. And I spoke about one particular mas'ala, which I'm not going to mention because I don't want to reignite the issue. Let's say, which I considered Sheikh Albani rahimahullah to have a qawl shadh in. Actually, I don't consider it. I knew it was a qawl shadh. It was a qawl shadh, meaning it was an aberrational qawl. It was something which was not what the majority of scholars, Jumhur of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, have said about this particular mas'ala. So I brought this to the table, and I could not believe the response. Because at that point, I wasn't attacking Sheikh Albani. At that point, I wasn't attacking his ird or his personality or his status as a sheikh, any of that stuff. In fact, my own, as I've mentioned to you, my own development as, let's say, a student, or let's say somebody who's in his journey of Islam, a lot of it, I loved Sheikh Albani's stuff growing up. I listened to him so much. I watched his stuff and read his books and all these kinds of things. So I'm not trying to disrespect the sheikh, but I said that. But this thing he said here was aberrational. All hell broke loose. That was enough for the majority, I would say the majority of, let's say, people who follow Jordanian Salafism and the Madkhalis. Obviously, they have already attacked me. But let's say those guys to drop me. Like, this guy's cancelled. Why? Because he mentioned Sheikh Albani in a way which highlighted one of his mistakes. How dare you? Who are you? This, that. I'll be honest with you. At that point, I realized that that brand of Salafism was a fraudulent brand, bro. That whole experience showed me that your brand of Salafism is a fraud, because you're telling me to go back to the Salaf, and the moment I tell you that a sheikh of our times has a qawl or an opinion which is aberrational, that's enough for you. In fact, I'll be honest with you guys, since we're conversational, having a talk about it. At one point, I was invited to a mosque. I'm not going to mention what mosque it was, because I was very angry and upset, but I controlled my anger in it. I was invited to a mosque and this and that, and I booked the weekend off to go to them 2-3 days and teach them about certain shubuhat and certain things in it. And it was a Salafi mosque. It was a Salafi mosque, and then it was like maybe 1,000 people. I don't know how many people, 500 to 1,000. I can't remember exactly the number. But it was a large number of people. In my understanding, they paid money. Do you get it? And I don't take any of the money anyway. It was for the mosque. By the way, when I go speaking to people, I don't take money. I don't actually ask for money. What's his rates? What's your rates? I don't have rates. Anyway, so when I went to that mosque, they cancelled the event. They said, like, oh, because he said something about Albani. I'm thinking, I said something about Albani, and then I retracted it. I made repentance for coming across in a manner which is wrong, and so on. But there seems to be an unforgivable sin, and this is the point. You have a a card, isn't it? It's a membership card. If you don't take these modern scholars as these scholars that you have to go back to in every kabira and saghira, your membership will expire. That's the reality of Western Salafism. Not all of it, but a lot of it. That is the reality of it. So for me, I was not happy to have that membership anymore. I don't want that membership if that's what it entails. Because for me, that membership is a mukhalif membership to exactly what Salafism in itself, going back to the early generation, entails. So I'm thinking to myself, this is a bit ridiculous. And then I'll be honest, and I'm going to mention names, only because I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, but just to prove a point. Like, for example, Sheikh Abu Osama al-Dhahabi, who I have a good relationship with. Yeah, I know he disagrees with me on certain things. And quite frankly, I disagree with him on certain things as well. I don't agree with his, like, Jordanian Salafism and his thing of that. I don't agree with all that. Like, I think that the world is bigger. And so anyway, he disagrees with me on certain things. I disagree with him on certain things. Do you get it? But I'm not going to attack him as a person because I think he's a good man. He came out some years ago and he said something about, there's a particular Sahabi, I forget who, in the ayah where it says, إِن جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. If a fasiq comes to you with a naba, then with the news, then make sure of it. So then Abu Osama al-Dhahabi, as a mistake, he said that this Sahabi was a fasiq. This particular person is a fasiq, innit? Now, the Madkhalis jumped on him and said, look, you're talking about a Sahabi and you're calling him a fasiq. A Sahabi. And quite frankly, that's true. Because this is like, how can you call a Sahabi a fasiq? And then he repented. Can you imagine now? So I'm saying to you, this is the level of toxicity and judgment that exists within certain corners of the Salafi community. He's allowed to make repentance for calling a Sahabi a fasiq. But when I say, look, I'm sorry for, you know what I'm trying to say, if I was rude and disrespectful to Ibn Abdul Wahhab in your understanding, or if something came out which is wrong, or Albani, then yeah, I've just said a few things here which maybe came out wrong. That's not accepted. Do you know why that's not accepted? Because the membership card for certain movements of today is not based on the Salaf. Do you get me? How can you... Okay, so he's still accepted among, let's say, certain movements of that particular group. I'm not. So, for example, there's certain people now, we don't see eye to eye. I just heard that one of them, his name is Mohammed Malik or something like that, from Green Lane Mosque, he came out and made takfir of me, bro. He said, I'm a zindiq. I mean, who do you think you are to make takfir? Come and say that to my face, with all due respect. Come and make takfir and give me ta'leel. Come out in the alan, rather than spreading it on WhatsApp groups. Come out in the alan and say that I'm making takfir Muhammad Hijab, he's zindiq, because 1, 2, 3, you know. You went further, like for example, these guys here, their judgmentality, or their judgment, and their tabdi'ah and their takfir is going even further than the followers of Sheikh Rabi' ibn Hadi al-Madkhali. They're going even further than them. So the toxicity, the judgment in that movement is not appealing to anybody. You will be putting off converts. You'll be putting off new Muslims. You'll be confusing the laity. So these are the things that we need to clean up inside the movement. Now you might say, like, who are you to say any of that? A person who has gone through it, and I'm telling you my feedback. Do you get me? Like, I'm only telling you what I felt. Right now, I feel more welcome by Deobandis and Ash'aris than I do by certain followers of Salafism. I feel, and by the way, if I wanted to, if, for example, I didn't believe in the Athari Creed, I didn't believe in the way of Ahmad, I didn't believe that the Kalam of Allah or the Quran was harfun wa sawt, I didn't believe that Allah was above his throne, I didn't believe in Ithbat of Sifat, I didn't believe in any of those things, and I went to the Ash'aris and Maturidis, I don't think I'd be losing much, because they accept me more than a lot of you guys accept me. That's what I'm going to say. The fact that I'm sticking to these belief systems, despite the fact that a lot of you guys are giving me big negativity, is a testament to the fact that I don't really care. I'll be honest with you, I don't really care about the sects. For me, it's about the truth. And that maybe is a self-praise. Maybe I'm praising myself too much. But I'll be honest, I would almost lose nothing by coming out and saying I'm Ash'ari. I'd lose almost nothing from it. In fact, I probably have more followers because there's more of them. So with all due respect, what I'm saying to you is the amount of toxicity that is involved and the amount of backbiting and gossip and jealousy and hiqd and hasad is too much. You guys need to calm down. I'll be honest with you. You need to calm down. And this ta'assub, which doesn't just exist with the Madkhalis, it exists with other types of brands and stripes of Salafis, that is also ridiculous. Like, you cannot claim to follow the Salaf, but at the same time, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, have such a view to the Khalaf. What is stopping us from just going and looking at the books of Ibn Taymiyyah? Because I'll be honest with you, that was another turning point for me. When I looked at the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, it was a major turning point. Because before it was more binary. Like, this is halal, this is haram. Yeah, and there is. إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس من اتقى عرضه ودينه فالتقى الشبهات. We know the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir, yeah? But when I read Raf' al-Malam, for example, of Ibn Taymiyyah, I realized that the situation wasn't as deep. You can be more tolerant. There's a bigger da'irah. You can be more tolerant to other opinions. That's what I realized. So for now, when I say, if someone asks you, are you a Salafi? I say, look, from one perspective, following the Salaf, I believe, yeah. But from another perspective of, are you following these movements, which are going to confine you to 5 or 6 or 10 scholars of today, and if you don't respect them and completely follow, if your fiqhi opinions and your aqaidi opinions do not completely go within these ones, then you're not Salafi. No, khalas, I'm not. Do you get me? So what I prefer, because of this, I prefer to call myself an athari, yeah, which means I follow the athar, or the athar, or whatever, or the aqwal of the people of the beginning, of the early times. Does it mean to say it's hujjah? By the way, if I get Al-Harb al-Kirmani, or Al-Barbahari, or Al-Lalaka'i, are these aqwal hujjah? No, they're not hujjah. The only thing hujjah is Quran Sunnah. Even Imam Ahmad is not hujjah like that. Do you get me? Quran Sunnah hujjah like that. So what I'm saying is, even that, there's limitations there. Even that, there's limitations there. Does it mean I have to follow Ibn Taymiyyah and everything? No. There are other things, and we've made videos here in this very room talking about that. So there has to be a level of criticality when it comes to Aqeedah. There's no taqleed there. They can't, and even Ash'aris agree to this. There cannot be taqleed when it comes to Aqeedah. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to fiqh, I just feel comfortable following a madhab. Does that mean to say is that you have to? I'm not saying you have to, no. I'm not going that far as some mutamadhibs do and say you have to follow this madhab. So long as you're following a mujtahid, so long as you're following someone who you consider to be, has ilm and taqwa. You consider that to be. Then you've done your muhimma. You've done what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ. All of these things, I think you've done it. So that's where I stand on the matter. So I follow the Hanbali madhab. Can I come out of the Hanbali madhab a little bit if there's something I've done bahth on of this? Yeah, why not? Is it a big deal? No. For me, it's not like you have to taqleed. No. If we do bahth in the mas'ala and stuff like that, and we spend weeks, months looking at something, we can come out of the madhab a little bit, no problem. But by and large, I do that for my own protection, because I know that Imam Ahmad and those who followed him, they were voracious, they had peer-reviewed systems. Do you get me? So therefore, I'm a follower of a madhab, number one. Number two, I still agree with the Athari creeds and stuff like that. So that's where I stand. That's why I prefer to call myself Hanbali Athari. I don't, the term Salafi has now these connotations of you got to follow these movements. It's like solo fide in it. You have this card, membership card, and the way to break your membership with them is you have to, if you mention anything like a mistake of Ibn Baz or Ibn Uthaymeen, or this or that or whatever, or if you mention this ashkhas muqaddasa for you, these holy figures, if you mention anything about them, you're done. I'm not interested in that. That membership card for me is, and then by the way, with that, yastashibu dhalik, yeah, what comes with that, what accompanies that, is this feeling of superiority. And I used to feel it. I'm sure a lot of people used to feel it. When you're you say like, oh no, but we've got the right opinion. Fiqh al-tarjih. No, I've got the right opinion. No, I didn't like that. And then this shallow worship, like, do you get me? Like you're praying, and because you think everything is to do with belief. Just belief in the qalb, not a'mal of the jawarih. Yeah, this idea of a'mal and proper and intentions and ikhlas and self-accountability and self-reflective, it really wasn't there. So long as you're in a safe sect, khalas, that's what it is. So all these things were shortcomings. These were, I would say, these are the things, like, honestly, if you follow these movements and trends and scholars, you have to look at. Because لا يدخل في الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من الكبر. Whoever's got a مثقال ذرة, an atom's weight of kibr in his heart, will enter Jannah. So this idea of I'm better than him, and a khayr min, or minha in this case, there's a lot of that going on with the sisters as well. Because actually I'm following these scholars and they're not, and therefore they're mubtada'. You get? This is ridiculous, akhi. This is like, this is how to train someone on kibr. It's the best way to train someone on kibr. Give them a superiority card. So this is my journey, and now, alhamdulillah, as I said, I've come through the other side, and I think that at the end of the day, I'm happy to share this with you guys, because I like to lay my cards on the table. I'm laying my cards on the table. I don't think there's anything here more I can say about it. This is where I stand, and I have respect for Ash'ari scholars. I have respect for Hanafi scholars. I have respect for Deobandi scholars. I can now look at their works, and I feel free that I can look at them and judge them, and there's good and bad and this and that. I can do that with everyone, and I feel like I've got a good relationship with the bulk of people in the Ummah. Whereas when I was in that group, to be honest with you, I felt like you can only have a good relationship with certain people. Not just Madkhalis, I'm talking about these other closely related groups and movements, which quite frankly have the same usul but just different tatbiq, and which or the same principles of tabdiya and ta'assub and membership, but different implementation. But quite frankly, I'm not interested in all that. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.